Stand by. We're going live. We're going live. 10, 9, going live. 8, 7, 6, 5, going live. 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to 10 Seconds to Air. I'm Alita Guillen. Before I introduce today's guest, I just want to remind you that I've added video to the podcast. So you can now watch the show on YouTube. Just go to 10 Seconds to Air and subscribe, and you'll get all the latest podcasts in your feed. Communicating with your teenage girl can be challenging. It's easy to pass them off as emotional or hormonal, or even say that they are simply mean. But my guest today says there is a lot to learn from these young women that can actually make us all better communicators. Mentor and author Chelsey Goodan has spent nearly 2 decades working with teenage girls, listening to them and empowering them. In her best-selling book, Underestimated, she tells us it's time to stop underestimating these young women, and joins me now to share actionable communication strategies for all of us to feel seen, heard, and valued. Hello, Chelsey.
Hi, thank you.
What a great title on this book, Underestimated. I'm guessing that is exactly what we do, and you're going to clear that up for us today, to stop underestimating.
Exactly, yes.
You have definitely been doing the rounds, promoting the book. I have 2 girls, one was a teenager. She's now past that. The other one is a teenager, and she's here in the studio. So
which I love so
If she has any
much.
questions, she's going to ask them.
I know.
But now that you're out there and you're really talking about this, not behind the scenes with the girls, but out there, what goes through your mind 10 seconds to air?
I think about how I need to just be present to the moment and listen deeply to whatever the questions might be or what someone might be struggling with. And then I think how I can believe in myself to know that I have something of value to offer and something important to say that's going to help and uplift people and empower people. So it's a process of making sure I'm present to the moment, and then kind of giving myself a pep talk of like, your voice matters.
Yeah. Do you feel like people are understanding what you're talking about now?
Yes. Well, I also have a teaching background with tutoring. So I feel like I'm good at breaking down things into steps and actually teaching them in a way that hopefully people understand and it lands with them. So,
okay,
but
good.
yes, I'm definitely saying something new in the realm.
Yeah.
And people are like, oh, whoa. I'm kind of saying the thing out loud people think.
Yeah.
And that's been exciting to have people respond to.
I feel like you're sort of putting us adults and parents on the hook.
Yes.
Because it's easy for us to complain. It's easy to say, she's moody, she's crazy, she's all of these things. Really easy to do because it does appear like that in our day-to-day world. But you're saying, hold on a second. There's more to that. What is it?
Yeah, and I come at it from a different perspective. A lot of people have tried to kind of throw me into a parenting expert type of category. And I'm always saying, no, like I actually am on the side of the teenage girls working to be their microphone for what they want to say to the world and amplifying whether it's their solutions for not only themselves, but the world. And it's different than a perspective of a parent or a therapist or a teacher even, because I, as a mentor and with tutoring, you're in a one-on-one space where it's I've been invited into this rare space of trust with girls where they always say to me, like, you don't have parental vibes, right? So they can trust me in a different way. And they definitely have shared things with me that they would never share with their parent, let alone even their therapist. Many have told them, they're like, I tell you more than I tell my therapist.
Right.
And so now I've been very much authorized by the girls to share their secrets to the world because they know and trust that I'm going to advocate for them.
So let's start there. What's going on that we're not seeing? What are you seeing that the rest of us are not privy to?
So the number one thing girls tell me is that they feel judged all the time. Judged, whether it's their looks or their achievement, or whether they're good enough, whatever they're doing, all the shoulds, right? They should look like this. They should act like that. They should be doing this. And so they feel judged, and then they feel misunderstood because no one's really meeting them where they're at. And they don't feel heard, right? Where we're not really actually listening to their thoughts, their needs, their perspective. And so instead we kind of teach them to put on a show just like adults do, right? Yeah. And teenage girls are so good with radical honesty. I have a radical honesty chapter where like they can really cut to the truth. And it's this beautiful thing about them. But so often we kind of teach them how to put on the show perfectionism and people pleasing. And that carries into womanhood and adulthood where they see adults, just trying to put on the show. Yeah. And this pressure and expectation we put on girls to be perfect and likable is just gives them so much anxiety because first of all, perfection doesn't exist, right? We're actually asking them to do something impossible. And so I just threw a lot at you and we can unpack a lot of that, but that's kind of the overview.
So let me start with the piece of you say we're putting that on them. They feel judged and we're putting that on them. How are we doing that?
Yeah, it starts with just communication, right? Yeah. Where adults tend to jump in and try to fix and give advice and slap positivity rather than just hearing, she might be struggling with something and being like, yeah, that sucks. I'm so sorry you're dealing with that. Yeah. And actually just truly holding space for feelings that are also displeasing feelings that women and girls don't have a lot of space for, like anger, frustration, disappointment. And when we just say, yeah, it makes sense you're frustrated about that, just reflecting back their feelings, a girl's like, oh, thanks for listening. Like, no one understood me. That was all they needed. Yeah. They didn't need my advice and solutions. And so that's actually the baseline starting point because girls are often characterized for their big feelings in a bad way.
Especially at that age.
Right. And I think their feelings are actually quite powerful and that adults have big feelings too. We've just gotten good at squashing and repressing and containing them.
Fixing them, pushing them to the side.
Until they explode in our 40s in therapy, basically.
That does sound familiar. Okay. So the girls are saying, I just want to be heard. Yeah. Just listen to me. Parents really do want to fix whatever is happening with them. Let's go through this scenario. For example, your daughter comes home, something happened at school, somebody was mean, something happened. As a parent, you just want to make it okay. What should I do as a parent?
Right. So we need to learn how to hold space for more discomfort and also I always say first, listen without judgment, with genuine curiosity, without your own secret agenda of like how to fix it for them. And the second step is phrase all the follow-up like a question where it's like, what do you think the solution is? How would you like to handle this? What do you need right now? How can I best support you right now? And having those questions helps a girl actually look within and find her own solutions, which are always better solutions than the parent projecting their story onto the kid. And, lots of times when this first starts, a girl might say like, I don't know. And have that I don't know. And parents are always like, she says I don't know. And as soon as they hear that I don't know, they jump in with their own solution.
Yes.
Because they feel like they need to teach her how to do it, right? But I have learned time and time again, the girls generate the best solutions for themselves. We need to trust and believe that they can come up with them. And that's where we're underestimating them. And so lots of times if they respond with an I don't know, I say, great, okay, that makes sense. You may not know yet. Get back to me. Can I check in with you in 2 weeks and see what your thoughts are? I bet you're going to come up with some smart thoughts on this. And then she has to actually look within and say, hey, what do I need right now? What do I think is the solution? And that's the mechanism we're missing for a girl to develop self-trust, right? We talk a lot about confidence and we just want girls to be confident. But if we're just jumping in and fixing everything for them, we're not even giving them space and time to figure out what their own solutions are. And then affirm what their solutions are. Be like, oh my gosh, I hadn't thought of it like that. Even if it's not how you would have done it, it's more likely to work if she generated it herself. So then you say, that was really smart. I can't wait to see how it works out. And then she starts being like, oh, I do have smart thoughts. I do have smart solutions. And that's the self-trust that actually creates confidence.
What if you feel that they are making a mistake?
Right. So I have a whole chapter called choice.
This all sounds great until they come up with a solution that you think is just is a bad idea because you have 30 years of experience over some of these girls.
And it's painful to watch a kid make not a good choice, right? It's really hard to watch that. And I am in more of the realm of it is okay for a kid to make a mistake because then they actually learn from it. Whereas if we jump in to fix it before they make the mistake, that's not going to land. They're not going to remember, oh, okay, I shouldn't do that. They'll just end up doing it later down the road when someone's not there to catch them or buffer the moment. And sure, we want, to prevent really life-changing, harmful mistakes. And that's where, when you create a trusting conversational dynamic with your kid already, you can say, hey, well, this is my perspective. This has been my experience with this situation. It may not be the same for you. What are your thoughts on that? Like, how would you like to handle that, thinking about that as a factor, and actually engage her intelligence and trusting that she has intellectual thoughts on these matters, because she does. Yeah. And so at the end of the day, though, if she does make a choice you don't agree with, I have found more good, honestly, comes from that than us trying to buffer. I mean, I used to buffer girls' bad choices all the time.
More good comes from what?
Potentially her making a mistake and learning from it. Yeah. We're really missing out a lot of opportunity for learning and growth and healing, because girls often think in binaries of just, good, bad, right, wrong. And it's actually that gray zone where all the learning and growth and healing happens. But we're not even letting her enter that space because we're so scared, right? Yeah. My whole first chapter, we
feel like we did that. We can help you. You don't need to go through that. That's painful.
Right.
And then we try to, I get it. We try to mask the pain or skip over the pain or skip over what you're saying is the actual growth period.
And then she isolates in her own feelings that no one's understanding or no one's caring about. And that's where they shut down, close you out of and they're just like, I'm fine. It's fine. Because it hasn't been communicated that it's safe for them to even share that, hey, I'm having a hard time right now. Can we just sit with that for a second?
Give me an example of something really specific in your work of someone that you've worked with. I know obviously don't share any names, but an example that we can really feel.
Right. And the girls were a huge part of writing this book, right? Like their quotes, their stories, they did edits on it. They picked the chapter titles. So I have a lot of stories even within the book that gives examples of what this space looks like. So two come to mind. One is 15-year-old Marley was an incredible volleyball player, and she made varsity as a freshman. Everyone was affirming her, oh, she's so amazing. And I noticed she was getting migraines and stomach problems, and she was so stressed out with the volleyball schedule, her school schedule. And so one day I asked her, I was like, hey, do you even like playing volleyball? And she was just like,
no one's ever asked me that before.
No one had ever asked her before.
Yeah.
Exactly. And she was like, I like that I'm good at it, because that's another thing we do is we affirm when a girl is good at one thing, and we think, oh my God, she's going to get into a good college. That's all. We think that's the route for her to be okay. And so I start talking with her. I say, okay, I know that you're good at it, but do you enjoy it? And she's like, well, my mom played it and everyone likes that I do it. I'm like, whoa, are you playing volleyball?
Back to the question.
To make everyone else happy? Yeah. And she's like, oh no, her eyes open. She was like, maybe I am, And so we brought her mom into the conversation and talked it out, and she ended up quitting volleyball. And I had asked her, what does light you up? What does make you happy? Where I'm actually coming at that genuine curiosity, not my own agenda of what I think she should be doing to get into a good college. And she loved doing fashion sketches. And that's, and so I was like, great. I know there's sewing class on the weekends. Do you want to do that? She was so excited about it. She gave so much time and energy to that. She became really, really good at it. By the way, her migraines went away. Her stomach problems went away. And fashion is such a good example of how adults will dismiss and minimize teenage girls' interests as superficial and silly. And the truth is,
and how are you going to make money off of that? Nobody does.
What's so fascinating
get you into
is
school?
There's actually so many jobs in the fashion industry. I know, because I've actually had enough girls now who are in their late 20s. They have those jobs because they committed to their passion and their interest. Whereas there's not a lot of professional volleyball career jobs, right? But we think that's the way they're getting into college. But I have seen that when a girl invests in her actual interest and authenticity and passion, that is where all the beautiful opportunities of her future actually unfold from, rather than back to that shoulds, right? The perfect box she needs to be in, what we think is perfect and the right thing to do, and those binaries. But instead, it's those conversations where we actually ask, what makes you happy?
And how do the parents respond to that?
I know, right? It's always, everyone always is
like, I had a box, a check on that box, and we had a plan, and now, so how do they respond
it's when they see their daughter in pain, right? Like the migraines and the stomach problems, those are so common. And the CDC report last year of just the amount of girls with anxiety and depression, like they're starting to see the impact on girls. And my solution is ask the girl, right? So often a parent comes to me with specific questions. I'm like, have you asked her about it? What are her thoughts on it? And they're always like, oh no, I haven't talked to her about it. Right. I was like, that's the first step, is the girls want to be part of the conversation, whatever the conversation might be, whether it's about her clothes, about grades, about social media, about, all the topics that seem very difficult for parents and they're stressed about. The best answer for your questions is the girl herself, your daughter herself.
Yeah. I have to say, I'm looking back because I have an older daughter and then I have a younger daughter. So one that's in studio who is a teenager who fits into this category.
I know. And at every second I wanted to be like, what do you think? What do you think about that? Do you agree? Like, because I'm always willing to have her check me too.
Yeah,
I mean, when I have big book events and I have teenage girls in the audience, I'm like, at any point you can raise your hand and be like, well, it's not really like that. It's a little bit more like this.
I do have to say, as a parent, and she can tell me if I'm wrong with this, but with my first daughter, there was a lot of, you should do this. There was a lot of that. As soon as there was this window of indecisiveness or pain or just something that seemed like it was off the rails, I would come in and I would do exactly what I wasn't supposed to do and try to fix it for her. I have noticed, and probably through that 40-year-old therapy. Now we're in therapy and the therapist says, have you asked her? Gosh, well, no, I didn't really think about that. I do find myself asking more questions. Does that work for you, daughter? Yeah, it's better. Okay, a little bit, not always. We can talk about that later. So I do find, though, that asking the questions and then continuing to ask the question.
Just checking in.
It's hard, but I do see what you're talking about. Checking in and asking and then being okay if there isn't an answer.
Yeah.
Right?
And also her respecting her intellectual thoughts on matters too. That's why I always say, like, what are your thoughts on that? What do you think about that? Because that's too, when they provide really good perspective, and we're underestimating that, where that act of listening and valuing gives her a sense of respect that then grows too. And her thoughts start developing even bigger and better. Like, it's a process. Maybe she doesn't have the perfect answer right away, and that's okay too.
Right. What do you do though with that sort of that teenage meanness? Because there's a lot of it appears. What is that? I want you to explain that, please. Yeah. What is that? Because we have that Mean Girls, the movie Mean Girls is out. You do see meanness within girls. You see this. I tell my first kid, I would say she's mean. My third one now, I would say, what do you think's going on with her? She must be, what's happening there? So girls do not
come out of the womb mean. Okay?
Yeah, that's true.
And it is wild how many people are like, oh, you wrote a book on teenage girls. They're so mean, right?
Yeah.
And I'm really.
That's really funny.
I know. And I believe this is actually a narrative. We are finally putting a nail in the coffin, right? Like, it still exists, but Gen Z is so much better at this. They know that girls are supposed to be supporting girls, that women are supposed to be supporting women. And, older generations grew up during a time where there was limited seats at the table. There really were only hiring one woman for that job or one seat at that boardroom table.
There was competition. We were
taught to compete always, right? And in multiple realms. And that is not how Gen Z sees it. They have grown up enough in an environment where they can see more women with big jobs or whatever it might be in leadership positions.
Oh, I love that.
So, and also just on a media scale or celebrities, Taylor Swift's all about girls supporting girls, right? Like, there's been a messaging they've heard that's way different, which is beautiful. So first and foremost, the amount of time and energy we say the words out loud about meanness, I would like to devote the same amount of time and energy to being like, well, girls support girls now. That's what they do. Girls support girls.
Such a great point. I love that.
Because what you give energy to will grow bigger, right? And so and we're going to actualize, this a self-fulfilling prophecy, this meanness idea. And so that said, if a girl that I'm working with is facing a mean girl situation at school, because it still happens, we're still messy, imperfect human beings trying to figure this world out. And I have found also Gen Z is way better at mental health, psychology, compassion. Like they love taking that type of perspective on things. So I'll often ask her, I'm like, well, the girl who's being mean, what do you think her home life is like? What are her parents like? Do you know? And they usually know. They're like, oh, her dad's never around. Her mom criticizes her all the time, right? And I'm like, oh God, that sucks.
Yeah,
like
that's hard.
She must be functioning out of her own pain. Like this is not about you, right?
Yeah.
She's in pain.
Right.
And by her making you feel bad makes maybe her feel better. And the girl I'm working with is always like, oh my gosh, yeah, that must really suck for her. Like they go to compassion really fast. And then when they understand it's not about them.
That makes me so happy.
Yes, there's so much hope. Like my book is hopeful in terms of, and they're so smart with mental health stuff, and people love to criticize social media. And of course, there's harmful things about that. But I also see the girls learn incredible mental health and psychology things from social media, where I have girls, I know, she's nodding her head, everyone, for the record. I mean, the amount of girls who've told me about different trauma responses or their mother wound or, all these different complicated things and issues that I didn't know about when I was younger, where like they know how to name their anxiety now. I often say, I had anxiety as a teenage girl, but I didn't even know that word really to name it, right? No one talked about it. So that to me, as much as everyone's worried about the anxiety, I'm like, they're naming it. They're saying it out loud. That's progress.
So back to how you handle that. If someone comes to you with the mean girl situation at school, you will ask them what do you think's going on with them. They get to a place of compassion. And then what happens for that person?
I find that they release it a lot more. They're not like bearing the weight of it so badly as their self-worth or identity. And when you kind of, let go of what people care and what people think about you, that's the most freeing state. And that's, I'm always trying to get to with a girl is like, what is her authenticity? What is her innate weirdness that makes her feel most herself? And I affirm that. And that's when, and whatever that looks like, right? I use the word weird specifically because it can access insecurity. Everyone's like, oh, am I weird? I think weirdness is fantastic and that we're way too focused on girls being normal and like everybody else and doing the thing everyone else is doing. And that's where I see more really sneaky harm done versus if you lean into what makes a girl weird and affirm it, you can see she'll be like, oh yeah, I do that. Yeah, that is who I am. And
how do you do that? How do you get in there to affirm that?
Well, so in the compliments chapter, I talk a lot about how to specifically affirm people, anyone in your life, right? To help them feel seen and heard and understood and valued. And I always say increase your compliments to 3 sentences at least.
What does that mean?
So instead of being like, oh, you're amazing, which we do to a lot of girls, or like, oh, girl boss, we do these kind of like throw them away type of affirmations for girls thinking we're empowering
That's as far as we get at my age.
Right, yeah. And instead I go, oh my gosh, I really notice how you juggle your 4 AP classes. You come home, you take care of your younger sibling, and then you make sure that you exercise so that you can prepare for your big match tomorrow, or you do your stretching. And I like kind of point out all the things she's doing. And I'm like, and then it's basically an acknowledgement, right? And so that she sees like, a lot of times when I tell a girl that, she'll be like, oh my gosh, no one ever tells me that. No one ever really sees her in all the hard work she's putting in. We'll be like, oh, you're a hard worker. We'll say kind of the generalized word, but it's about the specificity.
Okay.
So increase length. By increasing length, even just me now kind of trying to talk it out, right? I was trying to add more sentences and it's hard because I didn't have a specific girl in my head. I should have done that. But pushing yourself to even just increase the length will increase specificity.
Length is how far you go with that compliment.
Yeah.
The depth of it.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. And then that increases specificity pretty naturally. And then do it more often. Oftentimes we think we're saying compliments a lot, but usually we're just complimenting very surfacey things like, I love your hair, so on. Yeah. And
we all love that.
It's all good.
Yeah.
But when you do it more often, like lots of times we think people who are succeeding are getting a lot of compliments and they're not because you're all like, oh yeah, they're good.
They're good. Yeah, they're fine. What do they need?
Yeah. I mean, next time you can see it. Anytime you give someone a really specific compliment where they feel seen, they're like, oh, thank you. Like you can see a reaction in their body, right? And then there's a lot of talk too about women not being able to receive compliments, which is another side of this coin. And I would argue too, we're not doing enough of it. We're not permissioning women to really own what they're awesome at. through acknowledgement, like, oh my gosh, you just led that meeting and your voice was so powerful and everyone listened so well and they clapped after what you said.
You're really good, yeah.
Oh my gosh, yeah, they did. Thank you. Whereas we think that woman leading the meeting has it all together. She knows she's great at this. That's not the truth, right? When we affirm her and say, hey, I loved how everyone clapped after you said that, then she feels better about it. And then when we start doing this more often, then we can start receiving the compliments in a way that women and girls have told me over and over again how concerned they are about having an ego or being arrogant and like taking up space. And that's not an issue, right? Like we don't have some epidemic of girls with too big of egos, right?
No.
But it's funny how much messaging we give to them that they need to be self-deprecating and the more permissioning we can do to have them take up space is in, again, this complimenting environment where girls supporting girls, amping each other up,
And doesn't it help them all get better at whatever it is, better at being compassionate, better at being kind, better at being complimented, better at taking the compliment, all of that. I mean, the more we do it, do you see that?
Definitely, 100%. And so, you kind of asked more about the weirdness too. So I'm just thinking of a girl too who would definitely, you wouldn't have looked at her and thought, oh, she's like the popular girl at school or something like that. But she reads books all the time and she has like a subscription since she was like 14 to Psychology Today, right? And she would always explain these complicated concepts to me about what she's been reading in Psychology Today. And so I affirm that. I'm like, oh my gosh, I love how I learned from you about what you're reading in this magazine. I love that you spend time reading about that. Like, I just say it out loud and actually what she's doing and affirm it and celebrate it, right? And then she's like, oh, cool. Like now she literally is going to get a psychology degree in college because she's so into this, right?
Yeah. So how are you actually brought into these families or to these girls?
Well, so 16 years ago is when I started tutoring, like an academic tutor. And that, honestly was just all word of mouth. And so, and I was in the city of Los Angeles, very much tutoring for a lot of influential families as well. And that about years ago, I didn't feel good that it was just, girls that could afford me that I was helping. So I started volunteering my time to mentor girls from underserved communities, which I've predominantly done through the nonprofit DemocraShe. But I've done it through a couple different organizations. And I've always been a real supporter of nonprofits who are empowering girls, like the Representation Project's another one. And then I'm also on the board of a nonprofit called A Call to Men, which is all about engaging men and boys in the conversation of ending gender-based violence and harassment and discrimination. And what does healthy masculinity look like for a boy as well? And we got a nod from the girl again. I know. The girls are very tired of us putting all the blame and problems on their shoulders. And so I often say, let's focus on our boys, right? So a lot of dress codes, there's major gender double standards with dress codes. A girl gets sent home for a bra strap. Meanwhile, the boy has his boxers showing and no one cares for a second. And then, so the girls have been very happy. One of the big advocacy things I've done is like, hey, let's focus on the boys. This is not their problem.
And how do the boys respond to that?
I've worked with a lot of boys that I find actually it's really rare for them to have someone ask, like, how are you feeling right now? They're always like, they don't even have the vocabulary, right? Like bad, right? And so that's why I put a feelings wheel on the back of the book, because it gives them more language, the basic words of sad, angry, bad, and then it spans out on a wheel into better more specific words of what you're feeling. And I found words like frustration or disappointment. Disappointment is so much more powerful than we think it is. And when you name it, like, I am disappointed right now, there's a lot of psychology research to support how just naming the feeling helps you process it and feel it and then let it out, right? But it can feel scary to fully feel your disappointment. And so again, we come back to that squashing and repressing, and it shows up in different ways. So back to the boys, I found the boys are actually like, oh my goodness, I have space to talk about this with somebody.
They must feel relief.
Yeah. They are way more sensitive than anyone's giving them credit for. But we have to give voice to that and say it out loud and give space to it. And, A Call to Men deals with the man box, these kind of constrictive narratives that they have to never cry and never show weakness and always be in charge and be cool. And they're victims of the same system that we all are.
Yeah. So how are you brought in to meet these families?
No, I mean, honestly, it's just been word of mouth in terms of
But
tutoring.
you went from tutoring to then going mentoring.
Yeah, so that was through nonprofits.
Through the nonprofits. Yeah. Okay. And now word of mouth, people find out.
Well, and so now, honestly, with the book blowing up the way it is, now I'm doing speaking engagements. I'm no longer doing one-on-one time, except for all the girls.
How sad.
I know, except for all the girls that I'm still very, very close with, which is like, a lot of girls at this point. And at any given day, I have 5 text messages from our girl being like, oh my gosh, can you, and I'm still jumping on the phone or grabbing lunch or going on a hike.
Right.
I'm not. And I am going to continue to mentor. That's actually not entirely true. I just haven't been able since the book launch mentor, but in the fall they start a new cohort and I'll definitely mentor then.
And so you're one-on-one, you're doing speaking engagements, you're really talking about communication though, and how this translates to leadership. How does it translate into leadership?
What they found is, say, employees, the people quitting their jobs and being unhappy in the workplace is rampant right now. Yeah. And what they found with research is that they don't feel psychological safety within their work environment. And really what that equates to is not feeling seen and not feeling valued. And so in terms of a good leader, a leader will affirm very specifically their team members, because when you feel like, oh, they saw how well I led that meeting, or how I stayed late at work to do the extra notes, that they needed on that project. When they feel acknowledged, they want to do it again, right? They want to do a better job next time. But instead, so much of that is just kind of expected. And it's just like, the person's over there resentful, being like, oh, well, I did all that extra work and no one even said anything. And that's how teenage girls feel, right? Like I'm over here working to all these AP classes and no one's really understanding how much work I'm putting into this. And they're tired. And that's the way an employee would feel too. And so good leadership skills are helping your team feel seen and valued
and heard.
And heard. And that comes back to that psychological and emotional safety, that you can speak up and say, hey, this isn't working for me, I need more of this, or I need that. And people are really scared to speak up in work environments to a boss who doesn't hear them, right? Because then they're like, oh my gosh, they're gonna fire me. And so, but if you invite it as a leader and say, hey, this is always an environment to say the truth, that, you're not going to be punished for it. We are all serving the greatest good here of trying to, whatever the mission of the company is. But as a leader, you have to say that out loud and let your team know that.
Do you find that there is a threshold of, or a perfect space of how much, of this you input into leadership or even into the teenage girls? And let's see if I can phrase that in a way that's saying, you want productivity, you want them to engage in school or in work. Is there a point at which it's too much, or is it never enough?
Well, I do think that, yes, the emphasis on productivity is actually really intense right now, and that people get their self-worth and value from it, and that actually providing people with rest and fun we need a lot more of that too. Yeah. And it kind of comes back to understanding what your needs are. And as a leader or a parent, being like, what do you need right now? And a lot of women don't check in and say, what are my needs? We put other people's needs before our own. And it's like, what do I need right now? I need to actually just rest and maybe watch this TV show.
Right.
I need to take
And you feel guilty about that.
You feel guilty. Yeah. And then that is so the story of women in general. Yeah. And then, so actually a lot of what my book too is about is healing your own inner teenage girl that set up these patterns of people pleasing and perfectionism and putting other people's needs before your own.
That was my next question. Yes.
And
okay.
So that our own inner teenage girl.
Yeah, where are we getting? Where is this all stemming from?
It all starts young, right? And then it carries into womanhood and adulthood. These patterns do, and we continue the same cycle, and then we put it on to the daughter.
We sure do.
When we're triggered with a teenage girl, it's our own issues, right? It's our own wounds from our own teenage years. And we are just projecting our story onto her. And the girls are all like, that's not my story. Like, that's not how I see it.
Or maybe, is it supposed to be? I mean,
it's confusing. And so the more we can do our own work and healing work to figure out, what are my needs? How do I start understanding what pleases me? Because then that's the whole idea of putting your own oxygen mask on you, on an airplane before you put it on the kid, because you're not going to help anyone if you're dead, right?
Yeah.
But women run themselves ragged trying to make sure everyone else is okay before themselves.
Right. Okay. So give us some good, solid strategies to start with. Where do we begin to break the cycle?
The first is creating an environment where you listen without judgment. And, lots of times when you say cycle, there's also a pattern of contentious dynamic kind of set up already. You're butting heads. And how do parents ask, like, how do I stop that? So
some parents don't even ask, how do I stop that? They just blame it on.
Yes, exactly. There's a lot of blaming onto the kid.
It's easy. It's their low-hanging fruit.
Exactly.
They are.
And I have compassion for the parents. It's hard. It's so hard to be a parent.
It's really hard. Yes.
So it was interesting. The very last chapter, I ended up incorporating something the girls told me over and over and over again, which was unexpected for me. I didn't know I was going to talk about it. And that is making amends and to ask for a restart and a clean slate. Because a lot of parents want that clean slate. And so how do you change basically the dynamic? The dynamic,
what's
right?
happened, yeah.
And you have to do it really consciously, intentionally, and you have to invite her into it with consent. So it's a lot of times looks like going to your kid and being like, hey, we fight a lot, or we always butt heads on this, and I don't like it. I don't think you like it. I don't feel like you feel respected in this or heard, acknowledge it. She probably doesn't feel heard. And then, I just read this book. I've kind of learned some new ways to do things, and I really want to come to you with more just genuine curiosity. I'm not going to have a secret agenda, but I need you to trust that that's real because it's going to feel weird for you. So I'm actually asking, would that work for you? Is there something I could do that would help create an environment like that? What are your needs with this? So that we can have a restart.
So restarting.
Actually ask for it, right? And get her thoughts on it. What might help? And she might be thrown at first, and I find actually the next healing step is to then make amends, where you say, you know what, I haven't done this that well, and I'm sorry. And the girls tell me over and over, the only thing I wish I could have is an apology from my dad, and I'm never going to get it. I know I'm never going to get it. Like these quotes I gave of girls saying how they don't even see that in their future, but it could be a heavy thing like, hey, I didn't handle the divorce very well. I'm sorry, we fought a lot in front of you. Really heavy stuff where it can be really humbling to say that, but the girl is dying for it. Like she needs to not feel crazy. Like she's been like, this was bad, right?
Yeah.
Instead, everyone's just brushing through it.
Deal with it when you're 40.
Yeah, powering through
right.
these hard moments.
Yeah.
And just to acknowledge them doesn't mean you're a failure of a parent or anything. If anything, she will respect it because you're respecting her with that type of amends.
Or that you even have an answer right now. You just know that you need to restart and that you're sorry for what maybe you did wrong.
And then it's also, it doesn't have to be a big, heavy amends. You could also just little ones, just being like, oh, whoa, hey, sorry, I wasn't listening to you. How could I do better? Or, do you feel safe to tell the truth to me? If you haven't, I'm sorry. Right. That means you feel judged by me. I'm sorry. Right. And then you can even ask her, is there something specific you feel like I owe you an amends for? And again, she might be a little like, I don't know at first, I'm like, think about it. Get back to me. It's okay if you don't know right away. Just creating a new safe, emotional safety, psychological safety environment. Okay. And that can take time, right? It takes time to build that trust. And that's where I see the amends build trust really a lot faster. And then that's when the dynamic shifts, and then you really do have to show up, listen, phrase things like a question, affirm, right? But
so
what do parents
listen,
really want?
Affirm. I'm really trying to hold on to something to bring with me.
Yeah. I always say, listen without judgment, phrase everything as a question, and affirm with specifics.
Okay. Say that again. Just say that again. Slow for us.
Listen without judgment.
Got it.
Phrase everything as a question with genuine curiosity, not a secret agenda. And then affirm with specifics, even if it's not the thing you thought of, but affirm it and help her feel seen in that way. And what happens is what parents really want is connection, right? Don't we all?
And so do the kids, right?
Yeah, we just want to connect with the kid, and so does the kid, in a real way, in a heartfelt way where you feel like you can be yourself, right? And that's another thing, to celebrate their authenticity and who they are. Don't make them feel like they have to be something else to have worth, whether that's the A grade or...
Right, parent the kid you have, deal with the kid you have, not the one you thought you were getting or that you...
And being aware of any external validations that are defining their worth for them. Constantly telling them, like, you define your worth. You decide how... Again, there's so many ties to whether it's grades, their looks, the extracurricular activities, the college they're going to, all these things have told a teenage girl that's what equals her worth. Wow. And it doesn't, right? Like, she's inherently valuable, exactly who she is.
It sounds like all of these strategies, like you said, that they work for leadership. They certainly do. They work for your girl. It sounds like they work for all kinds of relationships too.
Yes. And I would say that with my own husband, right? Like, I used to do, he used to never go to the doctor, and it would drive me crazy. So I would just schedule his doctor appointments, which is like, what? Why am I doing this, right?
Yeah.
But I was
you're
like,
not supposed to do that?
He has to go to the doctor, right? And he's not going to be okay. And I would be so resentful of it. And he'd be annoyed and he'd hate the doctor I picked anyway, right? So it comes back to this idea of giving him a choice and agency. And same with a girl, like even if she makes a mistake, at least she has a sense of agency to make her own choices.
So how did you fix this with your husband?
So I finally, one day he had a health issue, was in a lot of pain. And I was like, okay, I'm so sorry. Like, that sucks. You're dealing with that. Like, I trust that you'll be able to figure it out. You know, and I just
or tell me if you need help.
Sure. But actually, I was kind of at a point where I was like, go for it. And he was like, oh, wait, what? Right? You know, like he was so thrown by it because he was used to me jumping in and fixing. Right? And then he got in a little bit more pain. And the truth is, we don't learn without pain. It turns out pain is one of our best teachers, unfortunately, right? Like, so back to those mistakes. Like, sometimes we have to have a little pain to make a different choice because people like to stay safe and the same or just do the same bad thing just because it's what you know. It's the devil you know.
Hard to do. It's so hard to not react to that and not go in and help or fix, just like your husband's okay.
Yeah. So then cut to, he got a little more pain. And then he found himself a doctor, right? Because he had to, because no one was going to do it for him.
Right.
And he loves this doctor.
Oh,
like, hilariously
good
so.
job, Chelsey.
Right? Well, the beauty was because it was his own choice, right? He chose his own doctor. So then it was the right person for him. And he owned it in a way that he was like, well, I made this, so I'm going to like him, right? Rather than, oh, you made me go to this person, right? Yeah. So it plays out in all types of relationships.
It totally does. Anything I did not ask you, we've covered so much and it's so great. The information is so great and actually so simple. I mean, you make complete sense.
Oh,
so
good,
it's just so simple it's hard to do what you're saying. Maybe resetting is just a good place to start. Anything though that we didn't cover that you feel like we need to?
So a lot of this has to do with too, once we empower and listen to the girls, they have better solutions for our world, right? Like so much, the last chapter is power, and so much of how we've defined and characterized power through domination and oppression and status and wealth and these really old, outdated, often masculine narratives. And these girls see power as care and empathy and generosity
defined differently.
And community building, you know, and Gen Z in particular too, once they don't understand our current state of affairs, they like really see a much more community approach to change. And that's a great idea. Right. We have historically always been dismissing our youth as silly, but think about it. You know, the Vietnam protests or them working for climate change right now, like they have something to say and we're just not listening. And I have seen the girls do extraordinary feats. And I list them in the book, some of the things they've done when they've actually been believed in and trusted to make exciting decisions about their own life and how they want to create change in the world. And that's actually the biggest part of what I would hope for this book. Right.
Is right. That they have a lot to offer.
And then they can step into leadership positions because they're ready to lead. We just need a world that invites their voice.
Amazing. I love it. Thank you so much. Okay, the book, Underestimated, The Wisdom and Power of Teenage Girls. I will have a link to this in the show notes.
It's a really good book club book for moms. And I have a book club guide on my website you can get for free at ChelseyGoodan.com. And it's really helps. Like, it's a fun book club because each chapter is a different struggle we all face. Like, even if you haven't read the chapter, it's something you've been dealing with, right?
Yeah. And we can all talk about it.
Exactly. Everyone has something to say about it, which is fun.
Oh, Chelsey, thank you so much.
Yeah,
wonderful.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you and great conversation.
Yay. Thank you so much. I love this. Thank you.
This podcast is for information only. It is in no way medical advice. As always, consult your doctor for medical advice.